early 2019, a lot of the rules had not been written yet for the upcoming presidential campaigns. The Green Party National has a committee called the Presidential Campaign and Support Committee. And basically that committee decides who is and is not allowed on the ballot. Now, this is where things get confusing because, as I said before, the U.S. system dictates that the states have the authority to say who gets on the state ballot and who doesn't. There's no national party that dictates who is or isn't on the ballot unless the state wants to adhere to a national party, which gets even more confusing because who is the national party, where are they headquartered, et cetera, et cetera. So in early 2019, I was asked to sign on to an email from Miss Merida herself, representing the Hawkins team, asking me to sign on to a list of demands that they were making to the Presidential Campaign Support Committee. Now, this list of demands included a minimum of certain signature requirements. I think it was 5,000. I think they got it lowered eventually. People complained. And then there was also a monetary requirement. And there was also a requirement to have a couple other things. But there were requirements in there that you would campaign in all 50 states. There were requirements in there about ballot access, that you would have to get ballot access. And I can kind of go into that and what that means. And there were quite a few in there that I just didn't necessarily agree to or agree with. And I kind of just shrugged it off. I had this email. I did ask the PCSC about it. They didn't really get back to me or have anything to say. That's the Presidential Campaign Support Committee. But then when I got the official requirement documents from the PCSC months later, they were verbatim. They were the exact same thing that Howie Hawkins's Miss Merida had put out there. So, let me just say this too, for those that don't know, Andrea Merida was one of the folks that were on the Draft Howie Hawkins team. She is has been a staunch supporter of him.
She's his campaign manager, correct?
Now she's his campaign manager, but before that, she was in his team as another capacity, chairwoman of the board, something like that. She's that was pretty clear. Kevin Zeese is his press secretary, or at least he was back when I was running. And although she completely denies having an official role with the Hawkins team, Margaret Flowers was the founder of the Draft Howie Hawkins committee. So, I mean, I don't see how she could deny that at this point. These rules were very confusing, and they don't really even make sense because each state has different ballot access requirements to get on the Green Party's ballot, if the Green Party even has a ballot line. A lot of Green Parties don't. So the fact that they would make an official rubric for who qualifies to be a candidate is even more repressive than what the Democratic Party does. Because if you actually go to your Democratic ballot in most states, you'll see that there is a long list of candidates that you've never heard of, in addition to the candidates that you've heard of, because that state has the final say in who is or isn't on the ballot. Some states you have to get signatures, some states you don't. There's never really a monetary requirement. That's sort of anti-democratic to ask for a monetary component, but, here's the Green Party doing it. And these rules were written clear as day by Andrea, so by Miss Merida. So I think it's really important to understand.
Just to stop there, because that's a pretty big accusation you're making. How could you prove that Andrea wrote these rules?
Well, I could tell you that they came from the Howie Hawkins team. They came from her email. Dario and I were each asked to sign on to this because we were two of the earliest candidates. Dario wrote back to her saying, what is this? Are you asking this on behalf of yourself? Because at the time, she was also a Green Party co-chair. She was one of the national co-chairs that we have. The Green Party has, I think, like 5 co-chairs, and then a treasury, and then a secretary.
So she was one of these 5 co-chairs, but also serving in the Howie Hawkins campaign.
Yes, at the exact same time. So was Margaret Flowers. Kevin Zeese was also in the communications committee, the national one that controls what the Green Party says online and on Twitter. And they've all refused to recuse themselves, all for kind of different reasons. Margaret says,
but I'm sorry, Andrea did step down, right? She's no longer a party co-chair?
She did not step down. She was termed out. She was not eligible to run again. So that is why she is no longer a co-chair. We asked her to step down repeatedly in 2019. She refused, and then at the end of 2019 or middle of 2019, she was termed out. Getting back to this email exists. I'd be happy to furnish it if whoever wanted it. I think I published a section of it. I could redo that if people want. But the PCSC never really admitted that this is where they got the rules. Now, finally, around the end of last year, I publicly made the accusation that, the Hawkins team wrote the rules that the PCSC was using. And finally, someone who had left the Hawkins team, someone that had left the PCSC, actually they left, as far as I understand it, National Green Party work entirely. I guess I could say it's Ron Birch, publicly acknowledged that he was on the PCSC, and he confirmed that these rules were written by the Hawkins team, and it's one of the reasons he stepped down from the PCSC. The Green Party had a mechanism where you basically had to fill out a Google form to get signatures. Essentially, we were seeing people sign up to put their signatures into the form, and they didn't get any kind of receipt. And on top of that, the signature total was never going up. And what we observed in my campaign was for 2 months, our signatures never moved. We would get people to sign, never move online. We would email or reach out in various ways to the Presidential Campaign Support Committee and got nothing back. So finally, some of the other candidates, and like I said, all the other candidates were very friendly to each other, got on a Presidential Campaign Support Committee public meeting and complained about this. And the head of the Presidential Campaign Support Committee, the one of the co-chairs, said, "Oh, you guys are just complainers. It's very difficult to count these signatures, and I'm very busy, and I'll get to it when I get to it." All right, that was his official response. So for 2 months, he couldn't get to it, and we had to just sit there and wait. Now, that wouldn't be so bad, but during that 2 months, coincidentally, we got another email, an official email from the Presidential Campaign Support Committee saying that, oh, guess what? Because the election's almost a year away, this was in November, we're going to kick off everyone who hasn't met the official signature requirement. And so at that point, you've got the co-chair of the committee not counting signatures, and then someone else, unnamed person in the committee, a friend of mine, I don't know if he's still my friend, but Andy Ellis actually wrote his own Medium article about this, where he comes to his own conclusions. I'll let people read that for themselves as to who this mysterious person is. But basically, there was a collaboration effort within the PCSC to get all of the unqualified candidates up until that point kicked off. They wanted a 2-person race between Dario Hunter and Howie Hawkins. I don't know why. I don't know why they wanted a 2-person race. You'd have to ask them. If you're not going to do a real Democratic primary, a Democrat with a small d, why waste your time getting signatures and getting money? Just give the nomination to Hawkins. The signature requirement was used to kick candidates off the ballot. I keep telling people to look at the North Carolina ballot. There is one candidate on the ballot, and that one candidate is Howie Hawkins. And then hilariously, because it's ranked choice voting, there's a none of the above option, and I guess you could rank it. So that's their idea of democracy over in the Green Party of North Carolina, because they said, oh, we're going to use this one particular time in history where the PCSC stopped counting the signatures to justify just putting Howie Hawkins on the ballot. And that's what I keep explaining to people. If you let the Howie Hawkins folks write the rules, they're going to write the rules so Howie's going to win, and they're going to play dirty. This is not going to be a fair fight. There's no reason to stay in it as if it's a fair fight. I wish that the Green Party would have just done what the Republican Party did, which is just say, we're going to go with Trump. Every other candidate can just F off. And if you do a local race, it doesn't really make a difference. National's going to go with Trump anyway. The Green Party could have chose to do that with Hawkins. Instead, they're taking all of us through they took all of us through this ridiculous process, asking us to raise thousands of dollars when they knew what their end result was going to be. And we're talking about, at the time, it was 7 candidates total. They just couldn't handle the idea, they being the PCSC Green Party folks in charge, of having a primary with 7 candidates on the ballot. They needed to reduce it down to 2, and some states even down to 1. I don't know what else to say. It's complete hypocrisy on the Green Party's part.
Well, Ian, I know that we don't have much time left. There's so much to cover with what happened this year in the 2020 Green Party nomination process. So many interesting things that Howie Hawkins said. There's the whole side story of Mike Gravel and the email that went out with the Mike Gravel campaign. That was an odd thing, even though Mike Gravel didn't know who Howie Hawkins was at the time that this email went out asking people to send him donations. And again, there's the whole aspect of Dario Hunter that we can go into. But I guess just to kind of close out, what is it most important for folks who don't know much about the Green Party, maybe some of these disillusioned Bernie Sanders folks who are just looking for someone else? Maybe they voted for Ralph Nader in the past, maybe they voted for Cynthia McKinney or Jill Stein, and they expect the Green Party just to have somebody else there to voice opposition to the two-party system. What would you want them to know about Howie Hawkins and the Green Party nomination process this year?
That it was and still is completely rigged in his favor. Note that these new burners that have left the Democratic Party for the Green Party are not being asked to vote. They're being asked to submit to Hawkins and maybe possibly Dario. But then they have to, the Green Party makes it so difficult to get you to vote for them. Think about it like this. How many times have you been asked to switch and Dem exit and Green enter? But how often have you been asked to vote? How often have they asked for your opinion in the Green Party? Who do you want to see as our next candidate? So many folks that I know, when they hear Howie dead naming Chelsea Manning or his statements about Syria, are just completely disgusted, or what he thinks about Russia, all these different things. But yet the party in general, if you start to speak out about it, and I encourage folks to start asking questions, speak out about it. Just the other day, someone who said they have parents in Syria was critiquing Howie's notion on Syria. And of course, all these Howie Hawkins folks come out and just start saying you're hurting the Green Party, you're a Democrat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is folks like Kevin Zeese, where you could see his really nasty letter to me telling me to just drop out and that I'm worthless. I published that. He was really pissed about that. And Margaret, Kevin, and him sat down and, kind of like wanted to threaten me a little bit, kind of wanted to get me out of the race, shut me up, I mean, this is the way this team operates. I encourage you to do a whole episode about Miss Merida, because what she did to the Green Party of Colorado is absolutely ridiculous. But on top of that, a lot of the personal attacks against me have come from her. I don't even know her. I don't know her at all.
As I understand it, she was also critical of the idea of Jesse Ventura entering the race and saying that she would work to stop him.
It's just the level of discourse is so low, and it's always comes back to, oh, well, we can't really talk about that because that would harm the Green Party. And that's where things for me just kind of ended with the Green Party, because I'm not about keeping all this crap hidden. I think that this should come out to the surface. I don't think younger people are just going to put whatever bullshit candidate in front of them and just start voting for them just because they're green. I think actually both factions, and I've told both factions, are guilty of this, thinking that any candidate we pick, no matter how bad on the issues, no matter how awful they are on the stump, is going to be an instant success just because younger folks are so angry at Democrats. I really think that that's a massive mistake. And I think that we have to, if the Green Party is not going to follow its own, I have personally talked to Jill Stein about this 12 times, and even went so far as to complain about it publicly during the Green Party debate back in Salem, Massachusetts in last year. And every single candidate on stage had something negative to say about Hawkins, not for just a policy perspective, but from what his campaign was doing, how it was operating. You've got folks in his team refusing to recuse themselves in very high levels of the Green Party. You've got them very intentionally trying to make sure that Hawkins is the only candidate that gets any stage time at all.
And I'm sorry, I know we're running over, but one other thing that we didn't cover that's also important to mention is that Howie Hawkins was trying to run with other parties to create a broad, unified left-wing nominee, him being sort of the Eugene Debs of our generation. So he won the Socialist Party USA nomination. And what's interesting about this is that while the Green Party was creating the rules to exclude you folks from being nominees, they let him get a pass at another rule about party membership. He's also running for other parties. He, I guess, had a little bit of a online tiff with Gloria La Riva. So yeah, I just would be interested in any final thoughts that you might have about Howie Hawkins running for other parties' nominations.
I think the best way to describe the Hawkins faction, consisting of Flowers, who really drafted Hawkins to run. I mean, this was her brainchild. And I guess one of the reasons, I didn't touch on this earlier, but this is something that's really worth mentioning. So before Hawkins was their candidate, the only real interaction that anti-Jill Stein faction had with Hawkins on any meaningful level, from them, what I know, was that they both supported a dues-based structure in the Green Party. They want you to pay to be a Green, similar to being in a union. Whether that's a good idea or not, I'm not really here to discuss that. But one of the interesting things, though, is that Margaret and Kevin have this real green purity notion. And there were a couple of folks at the Maryland level that really followed them around on this one topic. It basically means that, like, if you ever work with a Democrat, you're bad. No working with Democrats or Republicans. Libertarians are fine, but no Democrats. So this is where it gets strange, because they recruited Hawkins basically because they knew that they were seen as a head of a rival faction. As you mentioned before, there was this walkout, and they got Ajamu Baraka sucked into this because Ajamu and Margaret and Kevin are close friends. And it created another rift between Jill and this faction. But really, they see the Green Party as needing to be as pure as possible. No Democrats, no surrender on that topic. Like, if you were like previously a Democrat and came over, or if you wanted to work with the Democrats on different issues, maybe have like a joint, like a progressive alliance, like they do in California. Some Democrats that are progressive on a slate with Greens, they're dead set against it. And they went so far as to write a rule. And I know this because I'm in Maryland, and we knew that she was writing this rule that basically said, when you run for office with the Green Party at the presidential level, you cannot be part of another party. You can't be part of another national party. It was a very intense moment to say you can't be like part of the Working Families Party, which flirts or is a part and parcel of the Democratic Party. So what they didn't know was that they recruited Hawkins and then had no idea that he was part of SPUSA, which is a reformist socialist party. And so then all of a sudden he announces he's going to run with SPUSA in addition to seeking the Green Party ballot line. And rather than drop the candidate or have a heart-to-heart with him, they just switch their positions. All of a sudden, it's okay to work with other parties. And they didn't just stop there. They then said, well, why would we want to work with just SPUSA, who Hawkins won that ballot line. Apparently, he's a very prolific figure within SPUSA. I don't really know much about SPUSA. He didn't just stop there, though. He then went on to also run against Gloria LaRiva, as you say, on the PSL's own ballot line, the Peace and Freedom ballot line, as far as I understand it, because I'm not in California. I don't understand all these details. So if I get them wrong, I apologize. But I know folks that are close with PSL, and when I told them that Hawkins was running for that nomination, they were dumbfounded. They were dumbfounded because PSL is a anti-imperialist, revolutionary socialist party. Howie Hawkins is a reformist socialist. It gets back to an old Trotskyist versus Leninist Marxist discussion that I'm not going to have time for right now. I've been called a campist and all kinds of different stuff by the SPUSA folks. So all of a sudden, it didn't really matter. They wanted to absorb as many other ballot lines as they possibly could because it factors into another game plan that this team has, which is to get Howie as much percentage as possible. They don't care about Howie and his positions. They don't care about his affiliation. They care about the money behind running a national campaign. They saw how much money Jill Stein raised, and they said that money should be in our hands flowing through us. And not only myself and the other sideline candidates have complained about this, Dario Hunter himself has complained about this. Because at one point, Andre Emerita was being paid by the National Green Party to go to events as a co-chair, and then also being paid by the Hawkins team to go as the campaign chair. And at one event, she literally said, I'm here today with two hats. One is I'm the co-chair of the Green Party. The other one is I'm the Hawkins campaign manager. Let's have a fruitful debate today with all the candidates. Like, what? I mean, like, if Tom Perez got on stage and said, hi, back in 2019, hi, everyone. I'm here today to lead today's debate. And I'm here today as the chair of the Democratic Party, but I'm also the Joe Biden campaign manager. Democrats would flip their shit. Democrats would even moderate Democrats would say, what are you doing? Like, this is a terrible idea. You can't be both at the same time. But this is what they care about. They care about power. They care about being in leadership in the Green Party. They want to throw the other folks out of leadership. If you're a moderate Green or a Jill Stein Green, you're going to get your ass kicked out when these folks take over the Green Party. And most importantly, they want the millions of dollars that comes with being the Green Party's nominee. They want that money to run through them. They want control of it, and they don't want Jill Stein to have control over it.